Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Jessica Ward King, the Stigma Crusher here. Today I want to talk about 5 things that my depression tells me that I know are lies, but oh boy, does it sure ever not sound like it is lies when my depression is telling it to me. And it tells it to me over and over again, sometimes whispering like sweet nothings in my ear, and sometimes screaming at the top of my lungs, or at the top of its lungs, rather, like I can't hear anything else. These really are the top 5 things. So let's just go ahead and listen to them. So the first one is that I'm a fraud. This one, it comes when at times like this, really, when the makeup is on, the hair is done, the jewelry is on, I'm sitting upright at the desk, doing the things, at work, or parenting, or doing the things that need to get done, feeling like I'm just barely holding it together, but nobody else can really tell that I'm on the verge of tears, or just barely holding it together. And I feel like somehow I'm defrauding the world. Like, how can I be functional and be feeling so badly? Am I really feeling this badly, or am I just a fraud? Or it's that whole feeling of, how can I be saying I'm feeling so badly when I'm still putting on the front and doing the things. And it's that whole high functioning depression thing that I've talked about on this channel before. I do have very high functioning depression. I always have. I've always been able to get up and put on the face, a very, very finely made mask that I can put on and make the video, or do the talk, do the meeting at work, whatever it takes. And then as soon as the camera's off or the meeting's over, go and dissolve into a ball of tears. But as soon as the next meeting comes, or whatever it is, I'm able to pull myself together and do it. And so I feel like a fraud all the time, whether I'm smiling or whether I'm frowning, whichever it is. It's like I'm not being real. And so my depression tells me that I'm a fraud. And that's difficult to live like, as I'm sure anyone that has felt they're a fraud can imagine. And I mean, there kind of is that feeling amongst, there's that feeling that you can get, that you feel like you're a fraud, right? When you, for example, when you go to work and you look like you know what you're doing, but you secretly feel like you have no idea what you're doing, right? That feeling that you are, that you are a fraud. And it's a really uncomfortable feeling. It's like any minute someone's going to unmask you. Any minute they're going to find out the truth, that you have no idea what you're doing, or that you have no, that you're not really who you say you are. And it's this feeling that you can't be who you really are anywhere. And it's a really uncomfortable feeling not to be able to be who you really are. And yet at the same time, I don't really want to be who I really am, because that would be somehow worse, to show up at work and be, oh, like really glum all the time. And when people ask how I am, to tell them how I really am would be like the worst thing in the world. So that's the first thing. My depression tells me that I'm a fraud. The second thing is, it tells me that I'm a failure. No matter what I do, it's not good enough. Uh, you know, just this week, for example, my wife has been ill. She's kind of down with the flu, and I've been at work because I'm having to take time off later on for other reasons, and so I've had to be at work. And my son is home. He's not at camp this week, and so I'm Florence Nightingale, and I'm Mary Poppins, and I'm also working. And so I'm like parenting via Nintendo Switch at this point. And so my depression is telling me, like, you're a terrible wife, terrible mother. Like, what kind of mother are you? You're not doing well. You're clearly not killing it at work either. Like, not being able to focus at work. Like, what are you doing? Like, just failing on all levels. Failure at everything. and it doesn't matter what it is, like, oh, you haven't bought a house yet, failure. Your car's old and decrepit, failure. Um you haven't got that promotion yet, failure. Like, whatever it is, just everything is failure. And so that's one of my, like, key internal dialogues, is that everything I do is failure. And that's one of the things that I try very hard to work on for myself in therapy, is that internal dialogue that I am a failure, because that's one that comes up quite a lot. The depression tells me that I'm a failure. The third thing is that depression tells me that I can't do it. I find myself saying, like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And it kind of, I guess, tag teams along with that I'm a failure, because, it stands to reason that if I'm a failure, then I'm not going to be able to do things. But I will find myself, like, get up in the morning and I'm like, another day, I can't do this. I can't put on the face and go to work. I can't handle being the mother, being the wife, being the worker. I can't handle putting on the clothes and getting to work and doing and smiling and doing the things. I just can't do this. I can't even handle, like, as you all know, I'm on the diet. I can't handle doing the diet another day. I just can't do this. And so that's another kind of internal dialogue that it just tells me, you can't do this. You can't do this. Give up, basically. It's the constant taunt and threat of give up. You just got to give up. The fourth thing is that it's always going to be like this. My depression makes me think that there is never going to be, like, for example, there's never going to be a breakthrough that allows my bipolar to be treated successfully. So I've been in a state of really unbalanced mood for a year now, for a full, complete year now, where I've been, hypomanic for a period of time, and then maybe normal mood for a little bit, and then depressed, and then go right up to hypomanic again, and then depressed, and then a little bit of normal mood. And it's been a full year of this, a really rapid cycling. And so even though that's been a whole lot of change, where you think that the narrative would be, oh, things change a lot. No, the narrative is, well, it's always going to be like this. You're never going to get a hold of your mood again. It's always going to be like this, where, you're not going to be able to get stable, and you're going to suffer and not be able to get hold of your moods again, and you're going to always suffer. And even though, and, people point this out all the time, there are always scientific breakthroughs. There are always new things to try. And I know this. My brain still tells me, my depression still tells me that, nope, there's never going to be anything to fix you. It is always going to be terrible, and it's always going to be just like this. There is never going to be anything any better. And this doesn't make any rational sense, because, I've had bipolar since I was about 15, and I've always had my episodes of depression followed by maybe some hypomania or mania, and then typical mood, euthymia, for a period of time. And then, repeat. This is the first time I've had this rapid cycling stuff. Not fun. But it's always changed. And it has always come around to a period of wellness. So it has always changed. And so it's bizarre to me that my brain always manages to convince me that it's always going to be like this, because that's not the data that I have. And yet what the narrative seems to be is, well, you're always going to be bipolar. You're always going to have bipolar. You're always going to be suffering. You're always going to be ill. You're never going to be able to fix it, to cure it, to get away from it. And that's, strictly speaking, probably in my lifetime true. The breakthrough that cures bipolar is likely not going to happen for me in my lifetime. But I'd like to be able to get away from that narrative that my depression tells me that I'm always, and especially in the depressed periods. I mean, obviously, it's especially the depression tells me that you're always going to be depressed. You're going to stay depressed. And it says to me, this is the time that you're not going to get back to normal mood, and you're not even going to get to hypomania or mania. This is the time that you're going to stay depressed for, forever. Some people in bipolar depression can stay depressed for 15 years or longer. And my depression says, this is that time for you. You're going to stay depressed for 15 years this time. And that's what it convinces me every time. I've only been depressed this time around for a month and a half. And I've already convinced myself that this is the time that it's going to be 15 years, even though the last year has showed me evidence that I'm probably going to go up again any day now. Nope, my depression has convinced me that this is the time, that it's 15 years to forever. And number 1 or number 5, I guess, whatever, the last one, and the one that is most distressing, I guess, that my depression tells me, is that I would be better off dead. And this is one that I know a lot of people's depression tells them. It's, the suicidal ideation. It's one of the symptoms of depression, right? And it tells me that because of all of these other preceding 4 things that it tells me, because I am a fraud, because I am a failure, because I can't do it, because it's always going to be this way. For all of these reasons, I would be better off dead. It tells me that my loved ones would be better off without me, that I'm just dragging them down, that I'm making their lives worse. It tells me that because there is no cure, the only cure is to be dead. And I mean, that is, potentially logically true. If there is no cure, then the only way to completely escape from my bipolar would be to die. But I think anyone could probably agree that that's also not a really logical conclusion, because that's also escaping from everything, right? And it's not gaining back the things that I'm trying to gain back by getting cured. The whole idea of getting cured from the bipolar is so that I can have back my life, not have death. And so that's a lie that, when it sounds true, is the most distressing and the most it's the one that I definitely make sure that I reach out for help when that lie sounds loud in my head. I make sure I reach out to my wife, who I'm very fortunate knows enough not to freak out, or knows when to freak out, I guess, is the real issue. Knows to talk to me about it and to ask the relevant questions. Have you, or are you planning to harm yourself? Do we need to call your psychiatrist? Do you need to take you to the hospital? What can I do to help you? Do you need to stay home? Like those kinds of things. Should I take your keys away from you? That kind of stuff. And it's important for me, at least. Now, none of the things that I say could be taken as the way that everyone needs to deal with these kinds of thoughts. But for me, at least, it's important not to let it stay in my head, because it's like an echo chamber in there, right? When these lies get going in there, it's like they bounce off the interior of my head, and it's like they get louder and louder, and they're the only thing I can hear. And other voices of logic can't possibly be as loud, and they can't possibly gain enough strength to beat out these voices that I'm hearing. And so, the voices of reason and of logic don't stand a chance. And particularly when it's this last one of suicidal ideation, that can be really dangerous, right? It can start to sound reasonable. And that's not something that I want for myself. That's not the that's not the solution that I want for myself. I know enough for that. And so I try to make sure that I don't let it stay in my head all by itself. I try to make sure that I voice it, if not to my wife, then to my therapist or to my psychiatrist, or call a suicide hotline, or my workplace has an EAP, so I can call the crisis line there. There are a variety of places that I know that I can call, that I have their numbers programmed into my phone already, so it's easy. I don't have to go looking them up and make it a huge big thing. I can just, go and call them, and make sure it gets out of my head, and it gets less loud when it's out of my head. And I find that is not just for the suicidal ideation. I find that for all of them. When I start to talk about these things these lies that my depression tells me, they get less loud, and the more reasonable voices start to get a little bit more strong, and I can start talking to other people who are not in my head and have other reasonable, logical voices to add to the mix, and make it so that, I have other points of view to incorporate, so that it's not just an echo chamber in there, but that there's coming and going and more voices in my head than just my own, which is really helpful. So I'm wondering, from you, do you have the same voices? Do you have the same lies that your depression tells you? Do you have different ones that your depression tells you? And if you care to share, what are they? And how do you deal with them? Please do share if you feel comfortable in the comments section below. It might be a way to help get it out of your head and down on paper, well, down on the internet, I guess. And that, by the way, is another way. If I can't get it out by voice for whatever reason, because I'm at work, for example, or because, for whatever reason, writing it down sometimes helps too. So, that might be a way for you to get it out. But do share if you feel comfortable, because I find that helpful. And take care of yourself. If your depression is telling you horrible lies this week, I wish for you some peace and some more voices of reason to add to your internal dialogue. And do take care of yourself. I will see you in my next one. Bye.
Stigma Crusher.